Hi, welcome to Gotham Reader Radio. I'm your host, the Gotham Reader, and before we jump into today's issue, I want to just make a couple of clarifications that I'm hoping will make the consumption of the Batman media more enjoyable. Number one is I haven't given you guys a setting for either of the two previous Batman stories. While Batman isn't operating out of a named city at this point, many experts believe that the city he is operating in these early stories is to be based off of New York City. For the most part, it's just a urban backdrop, skyscrapers, boroughs, alleys, general, yeah, well, what you'd see in New York. Second thing is, while I normally introduce them at the beginning of the stories, I have not really explained who Bill Finger and Bob Kane are. To keep things very, very, very simple, they are the creators of Batman. It gets a lot more complicated than that if we want to look into it. I highly recommend a Comic Tropes video on Bob Kane and where the actual credit may lie. I just want to establish these two men are acknowledged for creating Batman. I don't think I'm going to go too much into writers' backgrounds. It's not really what I'm too interested in focusing on in this channel, but I guess I should just take the time on stating who these two individuals were. The third thing that I would like to clarify on is near the end of the previous video, I kind of explained how that issue was ideal comic for when people are trying to capture, I guess, the cinematic aspect of him. And I didn't feel like I really went into enough details I should have. By when I say like the cinematic aspect, or I guess the marketable aspect, the nostalgic aspect of Batman, I mean just the guy in a bat suit running around beating up bad guys. Um, when I feel most people are trying to recreate Batman for the public audience, I feel this is what they're usually trying to go for, just because of how grounded it is. And we're going to see how quickly that also disappears in this issue that we're going to be reading today, because things do escalate quickly. With that in mind, let's just jump into the next issue. And today we are going to be reading Detective Comics number 29, published July 1939, written by Gardner Fox this time, who is kind of a monolith in the DC legacy, or I guess the DC publication history. He's most notably for creating Hawkman and Hawkgirl, but he would go on to pen thousands of stories for DC Comics, and this is one of them. And the art is being done by Bob Kane, and the story is called Batman Meets Dr. Death. Now, starting with the cover page, we see Batman back on the cover of Detective Comics. He is soaring through an open window into a secret laboratory, it seems, knocking down a man that we're going to come to know as Jabba. And if we look in the corner, we will see today's villain, and I guess primary focus of the issue, Dr. Death. He is Batman's first supervillain. And as I was stating earlier in the video, this is kind of where Batman starts shifting into what people would consider more traditional heroics. Whether this being because Gardner Fox is taking over for writing for a brief period, or this was just the natural evolution of Batman, who's to say? But for the most part, it's going to keep escalating. And just from the beginning of the issue, we're going to see Batman has moved from being a mysterious figure of the night into, I guess, a national superhero. For those of you who would like to read along, I am once again using Batman Chronicles Volume 1. I'm not too certain where else you could find the publications for this story. I don't think it's in the anthology, but I'm almost certain it's on the DC Universe, I believe is the name of their reader database. And yeah, let's just jump into it. Moving on to the story proper, we see our cover or our title panel, which has a beautiful the Batman splash on it, still hyphenated. And of course, featuring our two main characters for today's issue, once again, Dr. Death and the Batman. And as always, we have a little blurb to kind of get us geared for the story. The Batman, eerie figure of the night, has become a legendary figure in the life of the teeming metropolis, righting wrongs and bringing justice where it has never been before. We then move to the study of Dr. Carl Herfern, to be more widely known as Dr. Death. He commands his manservant Jabba to enter his study so he can explain how he has perfected his death pollen extract, and he intends to use it to ransom the wealthy individuals of the world to pay him tribute. But Dr. Death knows that there is one individual who can most likely stop his evil plan, and that is none other than the legendary figure of the night, the mysterious Batman. Deciding to be preemptive, Dr. Death puts out a message in the personal notice column in the daily newspaper, hoping to catch the Batman's attention. In the newspaper it reads, "Batman, if you'll go to the General Post Office and ask for a letter addressed to John Jones, you'll find a message of vital importance." On the other side of town, Bruce Wayne is reading the newspaper when he comes across said message, and, because as we all know, Bruce Wayne is actually Batman, he heads to the post office to receive the letter in question, which reads, "Batman, at 10 p.m. tonight, Suite B on the 14th floor of the Beverly Apartments, I shall commit a murder, and I defy you without the aid of the police to stop me." The young socialite returns home so he could transform into his heroic persona, the Batman. So there's a couple of things I want to touch on in these first few panels. Number one, just to give people a description of our primary antagonist, Dr. Carl Helfern. He is kind of what you'd imagine a evil super scientist to look at the time. He's bald, he has a monocle, he smokes his cigarette out of those little villain things. He has a giant manservant named Jabba, who is a Cossack, from my understanding, and in general, just seems like a bad dude. Obviously, he intends to ransom the world using a deadly death pollen. That being said, he is at least aware that there is potentially someone who could stop him in the form of the Batman, and this is personally where I think the escalation of Batman being like a pulp detective hero switching into a more traditional superhero occurs, because this is obviously a global threat. You wouldn't think someone who's just running around in street alleys punching bad guys would be taking on a crime like this, or I guess a threat like this. But once again, we are seeing the escalation of what the Batman is responsible for battling. The second thing I want to touch on is, I guess, just kind of how wild the beginning of the story is. The idea of Dr. Death sending a message to the newspaper to challenge the Batman, or at least get him to somewhere else to challenge him, is frankly a bit wacky. But I mean, whatever you need to get the plot rolling. And then lastly, I do want to talk about when Bruce Wayne changes into the Batman in this issue, because for the first time we actually get to see how Bruce keeps the Batsuit. In this case, he puts it in a little chest in his study. No mysterious back room, no hidden giant compartment of a house, just a chest that happens to have the Batsuit, his trusty utility belt, and for the first time, a few other gadgets. In this case, suction gloves and gas pellets, which he will be using in today's issue. I also want to comment on how the bat suit, for the most part, is now, I guess you could say, in its complete design, or at least the design we're going to be using for the next couple of issues. We finally got the blue gloves. The utility belt has more or less taken on a image that most people should be familiar with. Yeah, for the most part, this is what Batman's going to be looking like moving forward, and so should the story. And with that, we move into the next panel where we actually see Batman begin his infiltrate the Beverly apartments. And he accomplishes this by first driving there in his trusty red automobile before scaling the building in question via first using his silk rope to lasso a ledge and pull himself up. Then, using the suction gloves he got from his bat chest earlier, he scales the remainder of the building, eventually infiltrating via a bay window. But unknown to Batman, Dr. Death had sent two of his goons to wait in the apartment to get the jump on the Batman when he made his arrival. But what these two thugs weren't prepared for was that this was no ordinary man, but the Batman, and he quickly defeated the two thugs and gave them a simple ultimatum. Tell me who sent you, or I'll kill you. But at that very moment, Dr. Death's manservant Jabba appears and gives the Batman Dr. Death's salutations by shooting Batman in the shoulder. This lays out Batman on the floor, but thinking quickly, he uses the gas pellets that he had taken earlier to make a daring escape. First, by distracting the thugs around him, and then leaping from the building and using the silk rope that he had had before to swing to safety and escape with his life. Once free of the thugs, Batman disrobes back to Bruce Wayne and calls his family doctor, notifying him that he needs to get patched up as he accidentally shot himself. Although the doctor has his doubts, Bruce Wayne quickly brushes off any intrepid questions and goes along his way. Meanwhile, Dr. Death is berating the thugs and Jabba for failing to kill the Batman. Dr. Death then tells Jabba that he has decided who his first victim of his deadly pollen extract is going to be, a John P. Van Smith, who Dr. Death has said has failed to pay his tribute to him, so he must die. As Jabba proceeds along his mission, it is destiny that ends up coming in the favor of John P. Van Smith, as none other than Bruce Wayne is driving down a road when he spots Jabba, and using his quick thinking, trails the giant of a man, and when he sees him attempt to poison poor John P. Van Smith, he quickly acts, saving the man's life. From here we move on to the final sequences of the comic, in which, after trailing Jabba, Bruce Wayne changes into the Batman and infiltrates Dr. Death's mansion. And without alerting Jabba or the Doctor, Batman sneaks through the second floor of the house and, quietly sneaking up on the two, quickly lassos and snaps the neck of the giant Jabba. And Dr. Death, fearing for what will happen to him, tries to elude the Batman. But Batman gives chase, chasing him throughout a secret laboratory, eventually cornering the Doctor, who, in a last mad bid for survival, decides to try to use a chemical concoction to send the Batman to a fiery death. But Batman, acting quickly, uses a fire extinguisher on the wall to launch it at the Doctor and cause a chemical explosion that leads Dr. Death to his doom. Or does it? And there we have it. The Batman meets Dr. Death. Very action-packed issue. Quite a lot to cover. But just in general, off the top of your head, what are your personal thoughts? Before I get too much into my, opinions on the comic, I want to just talk about just some really interesting things that are exhibited in this issue. Number one, as stated earlier, we are continuing to get closer and closer to the idea of what is the mainstream Batman. We're starting to see Batman use his gadgets. We definitely continue to see the feats of athleticism, feats of strength, strategic mindset, but most importantly, we also see Batman get wounded for the first time. And this is incredibly important because up until this point, we have no idea if the Batman is even a mortal being. We don't really have too much information on Bruce Wayne himself, but in this comic, we can confirm that Batman can get injured. He is capable of mortal wounds, and not, I wouldn't say not to the human level, because despite getting shot in the shoulder, he barely says it's beginning to ache after, escaping from the thugs and swinging from the top of a building that is multiple stories high. And just for it to ache is, I would say, just about shy of superhuman, if not outright superhuman. Other than that, we are still seeing that this is a more brutal Batman. He had no problem threatening the thugs to end their lives if they did not provide the information he needed regarding the Dr. Death. And as we saw with Jabba, he didn't have too much qualms about quickly ending his life. And near the end, we also see that he has no problem watching Dr. Death most likely burn to his death. With all that in mind, Batman is still more or less like 90% what mainstream Batman is going to be at this point. There's a little small things that are missing to kind of really just finalize the idea. But for the most part, it's pretty darn close. We definitely are starting to see the shift from vigilante to superhero, most notably because the other primary focus of this issue, or sorry, the main focus of this issue is Batman's first supervillain, Dr. Karl Herfrin, or aka Dr. Death. And while he's kind of, let's say, bland for simplistic terms, but also that's very much hindsight. 2020, Batman is going to have quite a colorful rogues gallery, but for now, this is his first supervillain, and it's quite different than, a jewel thief or a businessman trying to commit conspiracy. This is a individual with the means to threaten the world, and I guess the mindset and the ability to execute it. That being said, despite how bland Dr. Death might kind of seem, just, general evil scientist with plans of grandeur, he does exhibit things that I think are going to become hallmarks of other Batman villains later on. Most notably is kind of just, I guess, the resources at hand and the general narrative plotting for most Batman villains. He's not very direct with Batman. He has a group of goons that he was able to send at the Batman. This is going to become very hallmark to every Batman villain, having a direct, I guess you could say, second in command. In this case, the giant manservant Jabba. This is definitely going to be something that is also going to be exhibited by many of future Batman villains. And then lastly is how the comic book ends, which is the, I guess, unconfirmed death of Dr. Death. That is probably going to be one of the biggest takeaways from this. With that in mind, I think most people could kind of figure that we are going to be seeing Dr. Death again. Usually in any comics, when the narrator questions the demise of a villain, that's almost a 100% sign that the villain is coming back. With that in mind, that kind of sums up the main plot stuff I wanted to talk about regarding the issue. The other big thing I wanted to talk about is I absolutely loved the art for this issue. Assuming that it is actually Bob Kane doing the art, the way that the Batman moves, the action sequences, the paneling, it has this very classic pulp feel that it's just really hard to replicate. Most notably, the way Batman is now drawn. There's two notable panels that really just kind of capture the Batman silhouette and just how imposing it can be, especially with the backdrop of the night behind it. Also, just the action sequences in this issue where we kind of see the cape in these wing-like expanses. Just some of my favorite early panels of Batman is definitely in this issue. Also, some very important art trends are going to be started in this issue as well, and that's most notably using the shadow of the Batman to kind of create this more larger than life creature that strikes terror into Batman's foes. The two big examples in this issue is when Batman lassos Jabba, we see the shadow of the bat eclipse both Jabba and Dr. Death, leaving Dr. Death quite terrified. And then the second time we see it is during the pursuit of Dr. Death, in which we see in the backsplash of or in the background of a panel, the shadow of the Batman being cast in the background. And it seems really simple now, but so many artists are gonna play with this idea and really expand it into, I would say, like, core principle when drawing a Batman comic. I feel almost all the greats are going to do some form of this idea. But as I stated earlier, this was quite the action-packed issue. A lot happened. I'm certain I have missed a thing or two that is interesting. So if there's something in the comments that you would like to add, whether regarding the issue or where you feel about Batman in the current narrative, I would just honestly love to hear from you. With that being said, let's leave a little spoiler for next issue. And in that, a foe of Batman's past returns. Thank you for listening.